You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. No matter where you are joining us from this evening, one of our radio and TV syndication partners, perhaps over on the live stream, youtube.com/Daily Signal, or you're catching the podcast later. We're glad to have you here, and boy, do we have a lot to dive into. The first, the biggest story, without a doubt, 300,000 voters who are no longer alive, dead individuals, as in their death certificates are registered and everything, have been found on the very first scan that the Department of Justice did on the voter rolls, which were offered up by only some states voluntarily. So not 300,000 in the first sweep of the entire video. No. 300,000 just in the very first sweep of the states which decided to participate in voluntarily uploading to the federal government the lists of their voter rolls. Now, before we get to this particular confirmation of these details from Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dhillon, I want to remind you how aggressively Democrats have moved, in the Senate especially, from saying, well, I mean, black people are too stupid to get voter ID, and they're too poor. Women are too stupid. And also, you have to go find a way to get a passport. Americans could never get ID. And it's terrible, horrible, that kind of stuff. They have pivoted really hard into the DHS, ICE. The federal government is going to purge the voter rolls. You are going to have to go register to vote. And people ask, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? That was the question that was asked to, for example, Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona, who, just today made this particular announcement. You can kind of hear the panic in the voice, but, he's got a voter roll line of rhetoric going.
They won't say it out loud, but the bill has that every state's going to have to send their list to Homeland Security. Homeland Security is going to send back to these states who should be kicked off the ballots. And there is no secure way to assure that those people are going to be able to re-register in time.
Okay. So his statement that, oh no, the federal government's going to look over the ballots and they're just going to kick people off. Well, the question that Americans have is why? Why would they kick off? Who would they kick off of the ballots? It's not as though when you register to vote, you announce how you are going to vote. None of that makes any sense whatsoever. And this isn't the first time he said this. He went on a longer rant 3 days ago. He is very, very concerned about this. The senator from Arizona, certainly not a state that's ever been accused of, let's say, rather generous voter roll allowances.
So right now in Arizona, especially in Maricopa County, what you're seeing is the DOJ and even DHS of this administration trying to take our voter rolls and basically manipulate it to make.
Manipulate. They're going to take the voter rolls and they're going to manipulate it. Let me explain the manipulation to me.
Make sure that two things. Number one, they changed the narrative. Donald Trump lost Arizona in 2020. He can't deal with the fact that he lost in 2020, so he's going to try to lie about it. And then to make matters worse,
Okay, so what is the lie based on these voter rolls, though? You got to have a little something here that actually says, how is he going to manipulate the voter rolls in Maricopa County, you brought up, not me, and Arizona at large? What are you bringing to the table, Ruben?
Going to try to purge our own system, which is a very good system.
If it's such a good system, then why would the DHS purge individuals from it? Additionally, do you think that if they're not going to make a copy of the list? Like here's the list of the voter rolls, DHS. Here you go. It's the only copy we have. Don't change it. You think they're not going to compare the previous voter roll with the one that the DHS returns and says, hey, these people should be removed?
To try to push out all the people that are rising up in opposition to them, Democrats, Republicans, independents.
Oh, yes, that's Trump's plan. He's going to push out the Republicans and the independents. Yeah. Again, when you register to vote, you don't say, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Now, there are some states that do have closed primary systems, but you're not required when registering to vote for those states to say what political party you align yourself with.
Working class people, young people from all walks of life. And he's trying to basically craft an election that's going to help his Republican Party win.
Now, that, again, nothing actually of substance there that says what he's going to do with the voter rolls. He's just very vague. Oh, that Donald Trump, he hates the young people. Okay. Now, again, this isn't just him. Chuck Schumer doing the exact same thing all the way back on the 10th of this month. He went into a long tirade on the idea of clearing the voter rolls. Again, we gotta keep all of the voter rolls intact. Can't have people, having to go register to vote. After all, we know that most voters are invalids lying in bed, like Charlie's grandparent and Charlie's in the chocolate factory. And they can't get out of bed. They couldn't go register to vote. That's crazy. I'm consistently amazed. Do we actually have the clip of Chuck Schumer losing his mind? Yes, absolutely we do. Here you go.
Yes, but their bill isn't voter ID, number one. It is about voter registration. It allows ICE to kick tens of millions of people off the rolls, and they don't tell them until Election Day, and you show up and you say, you're not registered anymore. You're not registered here.
So now we got the narrative. All right, so Chuck Schumer, by Ken, who has been driving this home as he can.
Do not listen to the Republican talking points about voter ID. That's a ruse.
It's a ruse.
Underneath the surface, the SAVE Act is a voter purge bill.
All right, so now we've got the line here. This is what they are going with. They are saying that what the Trump administration's plan is the DHS is going to take all of the voter rolls, and then on November 3rd, on the Monday before the election, they're going to send out this mass super text, an email extraordinaire, and say, everyone's kicked off the voter rolls. Somehow they're going to know that only Democrats are kicked off the voter rolls, or only the youths or something. Now, none of this makes sense. Until you realize that when Chuck Schumer says tens of million, what demographic, what group do we estimate there to be tens of millions of in the country? He didn't say black people. There's more than tens of millions of young people. There's far more than tens of millions of women in this country. So what's the argument here? What is he talking about? Oh my gosh. It just so happens that after the very first sweep of the states that volunteered their voter rolls for DHS to check them out, here's what they found. This clip was provided to us over by Newsmax's Finity. They pivoted over to Harmeet Dhillon. This is some pretty wild stuff.
She was put back on the rolls, and I verified with that clerk. Can you see if she's active or inactive? And she checked, and that deceased family member was marked active.
Okay, so she had a dead family member taken off the rolls 20 years after this person died and then put back on the rolls, meaning somebody was voting under the name of her dead family member, and she's the Speaker of the House in Michigan. So how big a problem, how widespread do you think this really is?
Well, first of all, I don't really need to quantify how widespread it is. The fact that it happens in even one case is enough for me to believe there's a law violation. And so, what's interesting is the left keeps moving the goalposts. So first they said this doesn't happen or it's extremely rare. Well, actually, the review so far this last year of approximately between 50 and 60 million voter records, which states have voluntarily uploaded or we've gotten from them, has shown hundreds of thousands, over 300,000 dead people on the voter rolls, and that's just a slice of the voter rolls. And we have referred tens of thousands of potential non-citizens who are on the voter rolls, and that's a lengthier process.
Hang on. So first of all, 300,000 people who just aren't alive anymore, they're dead. They are, again, when you file that death certificate, your state, your locality, and then the federal government goes, you're dead. Better stop those Social Security payments, among other things. And then what does Harmeet finish it off with? Again, best assistant attorney general that one could have asked for. And here she is delivering yet again. What's the case to be made? Hey, I just can't help but notice already in the very first sweep of the states voluntarily offering up their voter rolls, tens of thousands of individuals suspected of being illegal aliens. Again, you have to kind of check that through the system.
Because we don't want to accuse anybody wrongfully. And so we have to go through checking a number of different databases, sources, sometimes court records to determine whether this person became a citizen or not. And then finally, we reach a conclusion. And if that non-citizen voted in a federal election, we're referring those cases for federal prosecution. And there are some prosecutions like that that are being worked up by my friends in the U.S. Attorney's office.
Okay, so right now, 10 states right now, according to a confidential deal, at least. This sending over to Newsmax, putting up this particular data. Right now, there are 10 states in this country which have voluntarily offered to allow the federal government to just review their voter rolls. That's it. Of those 10 so far, 300,000 found dead, tens of thousands found to be illegal. Something that you were told, I was told, wasn't happening, isn't it all? Sorry, radio crew, I realize I'm 30 seconds over that FCC clock. We'll kick you guys over to commercial and continue on the live stream. None of those commercial breaks here. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Over on the live stream, if you watch the show live with us, that is, you don't get any of that. There's like one sponsor read, that's it. We try to make it a nice experience for you guys. To be clear, you guys have been told, I've been told, that the whole voter fraud thing is super rare and isolated, right? Isn't this what the Democrats often counter with? When you say, hey, man, this voter ID, we look at states like Minnesota, we look at states like California. We've talked about with the independent California state representative who told Stephen A. Smith, we played that clip on our show yesterday, that California forbids voter ID because of a measure passed in Orange County that was struck down. We've talked about in Minnesota how one person can vouch for 7 other people. This all brings us to Maine. Believe it or not, Maine is an excellent example of this because Maine's Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, made this exact same claim. It's super isolated. Well, sure, maybe there's like one illegal or two, maybe. Someone who accidentally put too many T's or I's, or maybe they bought a vowel for the last name, that kind of nonsense. Here is Maine's Secretary of State, and of course, Democrat, Shenna Bellows, saying you don't need to worry about any of these voter roll things. It's all isolated. It's no problem.
I'm sure there are, in some isolated instances, some non-citizens may be on the rolls.
But it gets better. It gets better because that clip, which is back from August of 2025, just a few months later in October, the Maine Wire would report that a Newburgh resident expecting an Amazon delivery of rice, paper plates, and a toy lightsaber ended up opening up her order from Amazon to find 250 state election ballots. That's kind of weird. I mean, you take it out, look, oh wow, it's just the actual packaged referendum ballots for the special election in 2025. Now you may say, hey, Tony, well, what just, that's obviously really bad. That's terrible. Certainly the Secretary of State made some kind of a comment after she had been going on and on throughout 2025 about how safe and secure and isolated that, these instances were. The Secretary of State for Maine, Secretary Bellows, announced that, it was just a small shipping accident. You order, something from Amazon, maybe a new book, a phone charger. And then you just, happen to get just a certain number of ballots that you could theoretically fill out and inconspicuously leave, not 10,000 ballots, but order just 250 ballots. Small enough for a small stack, And I'm sure there are all kinds of precincts only ordering 250 ballots. Oh, it's just an innocent shipping error. And then when she was asked by the Maine Wire about this, after, that is, the Maine Republican Party chairman called for a federal criminal investigation, well, I mean, she's like, hey, guys, I'm not answering any questions about this.
What information leads you to believe that this wasn't an accidental mix-up with the shipping?
So is there any other question from any other member? Can you speak to the perception?
Oh, gee. Oh, man. So what evidence do you have? Now, I have been, by the way, a reporter in this instance when I went over to, for example, a school board meeting in eastern central Indiana in which a counselor was fired. And my reporting was called false, erroneous, in the middle of that school board meeting. So at the very end, I raised my hand and asked, hey, what evidence do you have? You're going to make a claim. What evidence do you have? And the exact same look came over that school board member's face that you just saw on Secretary of State Bellows. Now you say, well, Tony, what's this referendum? What was on this ballot? I'm glad you asked. It just so happened that the first question was on voter ID and absentee mail-in ballot voting restrictions. Things like not allowing people to vouch for others' ballots. Meaning that you can't just go collect a bunch of ballots and hand them in. That would have made handing in other people's mail-in ballots illegal in this referendum. And it ended up failing 315,000 to 175,000. Gee whiz. How strange. Coincidental, I'm sure. We're going to pick the radio crew back up from commercial. Don't go anywhere. A lot of news tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So we've got one huge chunk of the country freaking out over the idea that after the Department of Justice discovered and confirmed that 300,000 people who are no longer alive are still on the voter rolls in just 10 states, tens of thousands whom are expected to be illegal aliens. And again, they're reviewing this now, you might notice, very well away from the election in 2026. The case the Democrats have made is that Republicans want to sit on these voter rolls until the Monday before the Tuesday election and then announce who's kicked off of the rolls. Now, by the way, the Save America Act, one of those key parts of the legislation would require individuals, by the way, this is a super popular measure, according to every poll that's asked this specific of a question between Republicans, independents, and Democrats, that yes, Americans should have to go re-register to vote. It should not be an automatic thing. It is an automatic thing in Wisconsin, and it is near impossible to get your name removed. It's automatic in Minnesota. It's automatic in North Dakota. And again, not just the Midwest and the Plain states, it is automatic in some form or fashion to have your voter registration carried over in 41 out of 50 states in this country. That is insane. It is insane. And it is why, if you've moved out of one of these states, you are still likely getting texts asking if you're going to come vote on election day, despite the fact that you haven't lived in those states for years. For years. For example, myself here in Indiana, though my colleagues are all in DC, I'm still getting messages from Wisconsin about coming to vote there. But what are a lot of these governors losing their minds over? Well, I mean, other than the rampant fraud, we're also dabbling now in a little bit of open treason to communist governments. Holy crap, which we'll get to in a second with the Code Pink crew. And then you have the hippopotamus of Illinois, the man whom the Golden Corral restaurant fears, J.B. Pritzker. He sat down with someone from the New York Times in what I can only describe as dressed in fabric made from Amazon boxes, or at least a UPS nightmare, all to talk about the revenge tour. See, he doesn't like this whole, the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Justice, by the way, who would be reviewing the voter rolls would be the DOJ. He's not really a fan of this reviewing things. After all, we know how sacred elections are in the state of Illinois. So he's announced that it's time for a little bit of a revenge tour here.
What does a Project 2029 agenda look like for you?
I don't think you can speak of it in shorthand, but I'll just say a couple of things that I think are absolutely necessary. One is we've got to restore the rule of law, and that means holding people accountable who've broken the law. I'm talking about in this administration when we... So far, nothing technically wrong with what he's saying. Hey, we're going to hold people accountable. We're going to stand with the law. Okay, that's fine. The last 13 seconds of this particular interview is where he takes that, and you see exactly what he means by accountability and upholding the law. You get a new one. The people in this administration who've broken the law and federal agents who've broken the law need to be held accountable.
Now, as a reminder, it is J.B. Pritzker who has just decided anything he doesn't like is illegal. Anything at all. Anything at all J.B. Pritzker doesn't care for in this administration, he's decided is illegal. And so his plan is just to go and arrest anyone who participated in federal law enforcement. Anyone out there who's been a part of this administration is now political target. Why? Again, because upholding federal law regarding immigration and because of things like voter ID are of importance to the American people by the polling data going into 2024 and now the polling data still going into 2026.
That means criminally prosecuted.
Criminally prosecuted, civilly prosecuted, whatever it is that we can do.
There you go. There you go. It's not actually about upholding the law. If we can't go to court with them because they actually haven't violated any law, then we'll go after them civilly. We'll go after them, we'll harass them night and day, whatever we have to do until we get the legal outcome that we want. Now, the irony of this is that Mr. Accountability just signed into law the Clean Slate Act, which automatically seals all nonviolent criminal records. Now, nonviolent in Illinois state law basically includes everything except for first and second degree murder and aggravated assault. Everything else in Illinois state law is considered a non-violent crime, meaning that after passing the Clean Slate Act, again signed by J.B. Pritzker, automatically seals non-violent criminal records for more than 1.7 million residents without requiring individuals to apply. Now, here's the fun part. This particular process, and I should be clear here that in addition to the violent crimes, that DUIs and sex offenses are also excluded from this, but the DUI is currently under contest. That by around 2029, if you in Illinois commit some kind of a nonviolent crime, then it's going to be sealed away from employers' records, from the police future. That's a serious, serious issue. Again, the Pritzker administration has also been accused over the last 3 years of releasing every single criminal that they have found who is an illegal immigrant because they do not want ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, to act on retainers and deport them from the country. So again, the irony of the whole holding accountable thing from the governor of Illinois is particularly funny. Of course, Governor Mickey Sherrill in New Jersey is doing the exact same thing. She announced that we're joining the township of Roxbury in taking ICE and DHS to court to block their unlawful plan. Again, it's always unlawful, illegal. What's unlawful and illegal in this case? Well, because they want to turn a vacant warehouse that currently only has 2 bathrooms into a temporary detention facility while individuals are processed and given extrajudicial due process, meaning extra due process outside of the removal orders that they already had, which means they've gone through their due process. So they're saying that because they bought a building that only has 2 bathrooms, this means you can't hold anyone there. Now, it should be noted that when the federal government purchased the building, there were 2 series of plans that were immediately filed showing a massive expansion of water, of HVAC, of other amenity and utilities to the building. Meaning, yes, rows of stalls. The performative outrage, though, all to claim that what the Trump administration is doing, which is very common sense stuff, is insane and evil, is laughably, transparently, hilariously pathetic. And this brings us over to the international scene where the exact same thing is happening. It all comes down to, yet again, Cuba. So you remember during the whole Venezuelan series of operations that the president of the United States was called cruel and evil and terrible and awful because he was sinking narco boats. And how dare he kidnap a Venezuelan president that Bernie Sanders, for once in a while, thought the socialism in Venezuela was great. The equality was fantastic. It's amazing. They only have one type of deodorant. It's very amazing. Well, now, the same leftist whining has moved to Cuba. So let me give you a couple of news updates on Cuba. As of right now, according to CNBC, Cuba is currently prohibited from taking any outside oil from other countries. Again, this would be a sanction. This would be an embargo, by the way, in the full power of the President of the United States. That'll be coming into play soon. And you hear some of the individuals claiming this is an illegal embargo or some nonsense. Russia has currently set out 2 tankers en route to Cuba. Now, there are some kind of middle ground centrist Democrats who are claiming this is going to be a Cuban Missile Crisis. No. Cuba and Venezuela have already tried to essentially paint over their own state flags on boats as Russian flags and sail things out. That hasn't worked. That hasn't worked whatsoever. Another piece of news, this published as an exclusive by the Washington Post just an hour before the show. The Cuban government just refused a request by the U.S. Embassy in Havana to import diesel fuel for its generators this week, calling the ask shameless, given the Trump administration's fuel blockade on the island, according to diplomatic cables. It is very interesting to watch the Cuban government attempt to bring in any kind of resources that it can, suggesting that, well, it's really a humanitarian need. And then when humanitarian needs are brought to the table, they say, well, no, not your humanitarian need, not you. Radio crew will send you off to the commercial and continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, this does bring us to Code Pink. So who's Code Pink? Well, Code Pink is that group aligned with the Women's March who wore the vagina hats in the first Trump administration, that weird alliance. And Code Pink is the more socialisty arm of the weird feminist, lesbian, LGBTQ movement. And in this particular instance, what you should be aware of is that a bulk of the funding from Code Pink, and again, an American organization, who has individuals claiming just to be any old run-of-the-mill Democrats, but very openly and proudly socialist, and to the very weird end of feminism where gender is super fluid and, minor attracted persons are accepted, that kind of weird, creepy crap. Well, this particular group just so happens to be directly funded in the majority by Neville Singham, a tech mogul who lives in China and works directly for Chinese state media. Yes, indeed, this particular group is directly funded, openly, loudly, and proudly by the Chinese Communist government. It is funded by the Chinese state media, meaning the Chinese Communist Party. And it shows in a lot of the things that they do. For example, the Code Pink crew will organize these little, journeys, just a journey. They go on a journey through Shangjing. Go on a journey and learn that actually the real threat to the real threat isn't China, it's the United States. Because the communist government takes us on a North Korean style tour. And of course, you are not allowed to provide material aid to the government of China or to any communist or adversarial government. Yet here's what Code Pink does. They launder the money. They will go purchase things that are pretty much money, but not quite. They'll stuff it in boxes and they'll draw aid on the side in Sharpie. They will then take those boxes to the foreign regime. They will hand over those boxes and call it aid. And then presto, they have just supplied some kind of exchange, some kind of goods required or necessary to the communist government. In the case of China, you say, wait a minute, China's funding them. Why would they be giving them aid? It is suspected, and it is currently under investigation, that Code Pink has been attempting to run chips from Taiwan and the United States, so certain kinds of graphic card chips that China is not supposed to be able to have access to, that they are running these illegally to China. Yes, the fundamental humanitarian aid of graphics cards from AMD and NVIDIA. Yes, excellent. Again, the propaganda is right out there in the open. Now, you might also be thinking that, this also could be a thumbnail from Megyn Kelly or Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, and you're right, we'll get to that a little bit later. But a huge portion of the Code Pink audience is all about trying to suggest the United States is the true villain. Again, it's the classic socialist kind of Zoran Mamdani line. The United States is the villain. The communists are, in fact, the victims. Because they would be flourishing if big old mean Uncle Sam wasn't getting in the way. Now, this doesn't just have to do with China.
Answer there, the Daily Double.
No. Oh, and this also has to do with Cuba. Now, lest you forget here, also the Palestinian kind of Islamic group is a huge, the Muslim Marxist alliance here. When I do say the Tucker Carlson thing, I'm not joking. Here they are with Marjorie Taylor Greene outside of Congress. That would be right at the end of last year. But again, this brings us over to the Nuestra America Flotilla to Cuba. The Greta Thunberg thing, the whole freedom flotilla, they're going to deliver all of this aid to Cuba. It's going to be humanitarian and amazing and awesome. No, this in fact would be violating federal law. And given the destination that we have learned where the aid's going to, treason. We're going to bring the radio crew back in from commercial. We're going to get into this because this is the legal definition of treason. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Now, maybe you were someone who thought that you had to be a congressman sleeping with a Chinese spy in order to benefit communist regimes. Maybe that's your only access. You just gotta get out there into office, some important position. You gotta fall for a Chinese honeypot. Some young thing comes up and tells you that she's Panda Express and she loves you very much. The Eric Swalwell routine. Yeah, maybe you think that's how you have to. No. There are a lot of unattractive, ugly individuals who you can just join and march alongside and yell in order to fund a weird flotilla to Cuba instead. You want to defend the communist regimes that are currently in collapse? Well, you can join the Nuestra America Flotilla de Cuba. in which you can help Cuba survive the U.S. blockade. So you can donate, because of course it's always a big money grift. You can learn and teach. So this is where they give you the Howard Zinn line of how America has actually historically been super duper duper evil and everyone is a victim of the United States. And then you can advocate, including my personal favorite, which is where they encourage people, we'll get to the State Department here in a second, in which they encourage people to join their little flotilla and take aid to where? Oh, directly to the Cuban regime. No. They're not like stopping off in ports and towns and delivering, food and friendship and magic and love, No, they're not actually stopping and doing any of that. This is what they suggest that they're doing. Here they are in Mexico picking up boxes that are just marked aid on the side.
We're here at a port in Mexico on our way to Cuba. We're loading this boat behind me with tons of aid in the
Now hang on. What's actually in these particular boxes of aid?
Form of solar panels, medical supplies, and food. This is part of the Nostra America convoy.
Solar panels, food, and medical equipment and assistance. Now, by the way, it has already been reported that some of the medical equipment is very specialized from an individual claiming to be a leaker inside Code Pink. Specialized, so like not common first aid sorts of things, but perhaps a request from the regime itself. The food so far, not a lot of actual foodstuffs are loaded in. Most of the things that are being loaded in are tech components and solar panels. We'll explain why that's important here in a second.
Where hundreds of thousands of people have donated, have mobilized, many of whom are going to be in Havana meeting us when we get off the boat. They've already been on the ground there distributing aid, meeting with local people.
There you see the weird lesbian with the lesbian Code Pink flag, the Palestine flag. Yes, solidarity.
People and seeing how the U.S. blockade and the recent escalation of withholding fuel is affecting the people there.
Now, as to the aid that is currently on the way there, it is suspected that these are solar panels in order to provide communication reliability for the regime. The regime is without power. And these solar panels, you guys do realize that dropping off a couple solar panels, they're not just going to put that in Abuela's house in the city center so that the old grandpas can play chess together, get in there and the light that it soaks up from the day so everyone can get together, enjoy some good music and fun. That's not what it's about. They are running certain supplies which are banned from export and import into Cuba. They are running that, or going to attempt to run it through the United States blockade to assist the communist regime. By definition, by legal definition, under the federal statutes, that's treason. You're not allowed to aid and abet a member of a foreign government acting in an adversarial fashion against the United States. The forms for treason, the legal statute for treason, which is very, very specific, does not mean you only can not provide, you can't run guns to a country that we're at war with. That's not what it's limited to. An adversarial power means any that Congress has deemed a national security threat. Those include those that we have any kind of sanction against. For example, if the United States put sanctions on Spain, and then you attempted to provide material aid to Spain to ease the actions of the United States via those sanctions, you would be guilty of treason under U.S. Code. Now, of course, members of Congress have made it very, very clear, by the way, including our very own only Cuban-American member of Congress, being Representative Carlos Gimenez, that this is highly, highly treasonous, that these individuals should be arrested, they should be investigated. The State Department has made it very clear that, quote, organizations like Code Pink and the People's Forum denigrate the United States, whitewash the violence of Marxist regimes, and run cover for narco-terrorists like Maduro, while enjoying an influx of cash from a donor network with direct connections to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, speaking of Marco Rubio and the Secretary of State, this brings us to the international news side of things. President Trump and Rubio are heading off to Mar-a-Lago for the weekend. And, what you say, Tony, why are you showing me footage of Marco Rubio and the president getting off of Marine One, getting onto Air Force One, and heading down to Mar-a-Lago for the weekend? Well, that would be the very last time that we saw a particular operation like this. Right before the weekend, President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio flew to Mar-a-Lago. So, I don't know, I've got just kind of a hunch that you might see a little Carg Island goodness coming up here real soon. And the President of the United States was asked about that. We'll get to that. But also, so was Secretary of State Marco Rubio today before they got on Marine One to head over to Air Force One. Here's that.
Yes, how soon? President Trump said this week that he can take Cuba. How soon can that happen?
Well, I mean, Cuba's a disaster, and it's because of their communist government. It doesn't work. So I don't have any news for you on that today, other than that's been going on for 67 years. They're a disaster. It's the worst it's ever been.
So the President of the United States, Secretary of State Rubio, again, Cuba's getting very, very nervous, getting a lot of questions, fielding questions about everything from Carg Island with Iran to the Cuban regime just south of that beautiful Gulf of America. That's not even the next country that's likely to receive a little bit of the Don Roe Doctrine. Alas, the Department of Justice, according to the New York Times, is potentially getting ready to file the same type of charges that were levied at Nicolas Maduro to the president of Colombia. So the New York Times is running this as breaking news. This is according to some inside sources that they are claiming, that says they are said to be pursuing. I don't know anything about this yet. I haven't reached out to my sources to verify, which I usually try to do. So take this one with a grain of Colombian coffee. They report, quote, the U.S. Justice Department is said to be pursuing criminal investigations of Colombian President Gustavo Petro. Now, to be clear, there are kinetic strikes that are still ongoing. These aren't just those around the Venezuela area in the Caribbean. These also include the Eastern Pacific. A clip posted by Southern Command, Southcom, today.
We're here.
A particular Colombian boat. This is down I have in the next section here. You can see the low skimming boat in the Eastern Pacific. Boom. Now, it is suspected that this boat is either from Ecuador or Colombia. Most likely, though, from Colombia. So, not sure at this moment in time how the President of the United States and Secretary of State Marco Rubio are engaging in requests, demands, diplomatic leverage with the President of Colombia. Of course, he's up for re-election here pretty soon, so he can't exactly, just play any game that he wants. And then, of course, the situation in Cuba we'll keep an eye on. This brings us over to Iran and Carg Island. So before we get to that, we're going to send the radio crew over to commercial because after we bring them back, we're going to talk a little bit about the administration side of things, stuff that has straight up not been reported for a while. Radio crew, we'll see you in a minute. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, in the meantime, very, very briefly here, I do want to mention that because of this insane news cycle, because of how often I am forced to drink coffee late into the night when we did our Iran coverage, when Khamenei was oofed, and producer Daniel is messaging me at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., it's really hard to get sleep, which means that I'm often either going to one of two things. I'm either going to melatonin, which doesn't work. It's really, really sugary sweet and leaves me like a small 10-second window before I actually am able to get to sleep. And then I might go over to Benadryl. Probably not good to take a bunch of Benadryl to go to sleep. You end up kind of getting those weird hallucinations if you take a bunch of it. So what's the option? So there was a social media campaign that I saw, an ad, a lot like this one, transparency's sake, for a group named Pre-Sleep, presleep.co. Now, I am rather picky when it comes to ad reads and sponsor reads on the show. I am really, really, really picky on it because I only like to do things that I test. So I took all of December and the early part of January, and the creator sent me some of the blue raspberry powder stuff and the pink lemonade stuff. You mix it into a drink a couple hours before bed, and it more naturally brings you to sleep. It's not loaded and jam-packed with a bunch of sweeteners like melatonin is. I didn't end up getting the weird hallucinations and the weird crap that Benadryl makes you feel like you've been knocked over the head with a bus. Presleep.co. Now, they sponsor the show, and normally there is a code called Tony10, Tony10, where if you go to presleep.co, Presleep.co, you get 10% off your order. However, because of the interview that we are doing tonight with Carrie Ingram that we're about to get to, because of the big news, seriously, this is kind of a bigger show for us this evening, our dear friends over at Presleep have upped the code to Tony20. So if you go to presleep.co, there's a link in the description. and you put in the code Tony20, you have to put in that code for the rest of this weekend. By the time Monday rolls around, no good. Those among you who graduated from elementary school could probably guess you get 20% off your order. This is good stuff. Some of you have used this since I've recommended it and you've liked it. Again, I'm more recommending this. So there you go. From something that isn't melatonin and isn't kneecapping you like Benadryl, I recommend presleep.co. Use code Tony20. It's only good for the weekend. After that, back to the Tony 10 stuff. So all of this said, this brings us over to the Iran information and updates. Because the international news doesn't just stop with the insanity over in Cuba, in Colombia, in the Nueva America flotilla, not even the voter ID fraud argument happening with the Save America Act over in the Senate, and the 300,000 dead people and the tens of thousands of potential illegal immigrants found on just 10 states' voter rolls. But before we get to the Iran stuff, I want to talk a little bit about this administration, because you haven't even been told that the Trump administration is delivering on a promise that I was probably more adamant about than anybody. And this is, can you actually cut these massive bureaucratic agencies? You say you want to get rid of the Department of Education, former teacher, wholly agree. So can you actually shrink it? We have Carrie Ingram up next to talk about just that. This is a phenomenal achievement. Don't go anywhere. We're going to dive in. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
A lot of governmental changes, including some shrinkage, at least over in the Department of Education. Dr. Carrie Ingram, Senior Fellow over at the Discovery Institute. Good to be with you. Glad to have you back.
Thanks, Tony. My pleasure.
So let's dive right in. You've got some new info, some information on the Department of Education, how things are changing. We haven't really heard a ton about it. Other international events have kept us hopping, let's say. So what do you know?
Well, this week marks 1 year since President Trump signed that historic executive order directing Education Secretary Linda McMahon to everything lawful within her power to start shrinking the federal footprint, that bureaucracy, returning education to the states, empowering parents. And over the last year, many people thought it wasn't possible. But what is happening has been absolutely incredible. So much progress has been made. I would say that they are far ahead of schedule, and much more is to come as they downsize this thing, reorganize it, and make common sense decisions so that we get back to states being responsible for their education as well as local control, giving parents a bigger voice.
So how are some of those things kind of breaking down? I know that it's easy for maybe a department to say, hey, we're downsizing some things, we're reorganizing, we're shunting things over to the states. But what are the actual tangible measures that we see of them actually moving through with this? Are these in the form of pink slips, or are what are we actually seeing come out here?
Well, quickly out of the gate, the secretary started looking at positions that were not needed, as well as things that were tied to radical ideologies that had nothing to do with academics, and they were taking time away from students learning reading, writing, and math. So she went in and she removed nearly half of the positions. We had a department with over 4,000 employees, largely pushing paper, eating up astronomical amounts of money before it reached the school level. So that happened early on last year. Of course, there was pushback, but it prevailed. And because it was fully justifiable to reduce all of this waste that taxpayers are funding. And so that was the first step. But then they went in and cut $2 billion of divisive ideology content. Over 200 pages on the department's website were cut that just related to DEI, over 200 pages. I mean, what we
200 pages of things that states' education departments would have to follow, that kind of a thing?
Yes, these programs and guidance on how to implement DEI, teach that to children. And they're getting back to things like the science of reading and equipping students with what they truly need instead of pitting kids against one another. That happened. They added over $500 million for charter schools to expand that avenue. And what they're doing is they're removing red tape, They're empowering states. Last July, the department encouraged states, submit waivers. We want you to be innovative. We want to remove this red tape, this burdensome bureaucracy, and let you be empowered to do what's best for your students, because that's going to look different in every state. One other thing I want to highlight, Tony, is the interagency agreements. And so part of this reorganization is moving things to other agencies that are going to do a better job. So we've seen the partnership. I believe there's been 8 interagency agreements with Department of Labor. We've got to prepare kids for high demand, high growth career fields, not work in isolation. So the collaboration there has been terrific. As well as just yesterday, there was big news that the $1.6 trillion student loan portfolio, that is going to be moved over to Treasury. Treasury is the experts. They should manage that astronomical loan portfolio, not education bureaucrats. And so the secretary is doing a great job of common sense moves.
Some of the things that I'm looking at here, I've seen a lot of consolidation under different departments in the federal government. I'm seeing the State Department taking over some of the things like USAID, bringing that back into house, not just writing grants to anyone that asks. Of course, we're seeing the Department of Commerce do the same kind of stuff. The Education Department pulling these things in. Have there been any court cases that have been able to stop anything, stymie anything effectively? I know the Trump administration's prevailed in a couple of cases, but there are so many judges filing emergency stops, stays, freezes, bop it, twist it, squeeze it. At this point, I'm not sure how I could keep up with all of it. So on the education side, do you know of any that have been more successful?
Well, in typical fashion, the teacher unions came out in full attack when the department decided to downsize employees and complete fear-mongering. So yes, there was a court case. Trump administration prevailed. But the teacher unions, they're misplaced priorities. Americans are realizing...
You don't say. A teachers unions misplaced priorities? No.
They have overplayed their hands, and they've exposed themselves to not be after the best interests of children. And Americans are realizing that to a greater extent. And so their power to really control the conversation, it is lessening. And people are just saying, we've had enough of these teacher unions. We want parents to be the ultimate decision maker of their child's education.
Well, Dr. Carrie Ingram over not just at the Discovery Institute, but also senior fellow over at the Independent Women's Forum. What are you working on right now? I know that both IWF and the Discovery Institute are constantly on the move. I honestly enjoy kind of keeping up with all the things that you guys are moving forward on. What's in the works?
Well, let me just highlight for you something really historic and exciting that's happened. Was last year, as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Education Freedom Tax Credit was signed into law. And that is the first in history federal tax credit to provide scholarships to children. It costs the states nothing. When a taxpayer contributes starting next year in 2027, they can give up to $1,700 per year to a scholarship granting organization. And in turn, it's a dollar for dollar federal tax credit.
That's
so it's going to be
wild.
You'll get all of your money back. You'll help kids. It's either give your money to the federal government and not know how or where it's spent, or give $1,700 to a scholarship granting organization, receive that dollar for dollar back. And at the same time, you're changing the trajectory of a child's life. Now, states have to opt into this. And so far, we have 27 states that have opted in, and this does not even take effect till next year. So state by state, encouraging governors to do the right thing, to put kids first. And again, it's not going to cost the state any money. It's not going to take a dime from public education. So that claim falls very flat. But it's a common sense move, and it's really going to change the future for our children in our country.
I wasn't aware that was a dollar for dollar program, but that's honestly, that's pretty incredible. That, of course, the Trump accounts, that's something we've covered pretty extensively here. These are some generational changes that we're taking a look at. Dr. Carrie Ingram over from the Discovery Institute, and then, of course, senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum as well. Thanks for taking a couple of minutes. Glad to have you back.
Thanks, Tony. If anyone wants to follow my work, they can check that out at discovery.org/education or on X at Carrie D. Ingraham. Appreciate it.
Now, just before we're done for the evening on the radio side, we have lots more to cover over on the live stream, youtube.com/daily signal. Of course, before producer Allison backs everyone out on the broadcast air side, the FCC side, I do want to give y'all a few quick updates on the Iran situation that are just now coming in. The supposed audio file from the new supreme leader, the gay son of al-Khamenei, Mojtaba Khamenei, he theoretically released some kind of audio message for the Persian New Year. There are 3 major analysts right now saying that voice isn't him, meaning that they didn't even find some kind of AI version of his voice, that the audio recording doesn't match any previous voice recording that is known of that particular individual. And so essentially, we still have no idea if Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader of Iran, maybe, is alive or dead. So we're just getting that information. I wanted you to have that before I send you guys away. Now, again, youtube.com/Daily Signal. You guys come over and watch the rest of the show this evening. It's just going to be good stuff. And of course, you get to hang out with the amazing live stream chat crew. They're excellent people. Well, most of them. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. All right, they have rolled out to their final goodbye in commercial land, which means you're all mine. Now, that brings us to the international situation. I did tell you, Mojtaba Khamenei, the incompetent gay son, his father's words, not mine, has now supposedly released an audio message for Persian New Year. So many different exciting holidays. You may have seen a lot of the Democrat leaders celebrating the end of Ramadan and wishing everyone a happy and all that stuff. But on the international front, this is supposed to be some pretty big news. So, kind of judge it for yourself here. For those who are listening and are not perhaps as attuned to the exciting language and dialect of Farsi, he is saying at the moment, due to the particular unity that has been created between you and our compatriots, despite all of the differences in religious, intellectual, cultural, and political origins, the enemy has been defeated. Yeah, guys, the enemy's been defeated. Yay! So there are one of two things here that's going on. Both of these are equally hilarious. Either number one, they just picked some random janitor guy and said, hey, read this. And then he's like, hey, guys, the unity is great. Again, as a quick reminder, the Kurdish populations of Western Iran are getting ready to break away into an independent Kurdistan, which has been a long time coming. Right now, we have information on the international and diplomatic side that the cultural minorities on the eastern portions of the country are attempting to communicate with the government of Afghanistan and the government of Pakistan. And the opposite groups are currently finding it out because Pakistan and Afghanistan are currently, at war with each other. So what does all of this have to do with Iran itself? The idea of the unity behind the regime, there are currently additional footage, audio, and individuals who are defecting from the IRGC to any group that will take them. We are seeing drive-bys in which individuals with Kalashnikovs, the most rugged and do whatever you want to it and it'll still fire rifle of all time, shooting up IRGC police stations that have not yet been hit by drone strikes. Now, today is the day that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had told all of the peoples of Iran to go out and celebrate, I guess, Persian New Year. Is that he didn't say Persian New Year when he made the announcement, but go celebrate the festival of lights and friendship and fun. We've got the skies. So I'm still waiting to see, what particular incidents and things come out of this. We are getting more information. However, again, the second option for Mojtaba Khamenei, if the first is that it's not even him, the second is that he just woke up from his coma or his leg getting off, and he's either so high on drugs or he's been locked away in the darkest room and some aide, some Grima Wormtongue, has come in and announced, hey, we're actually winning. That's why we have to hide you down here. So incredible North Korea-ing going on inside what's left of the Iranian administration, who now, by the way, is not only trying to target as best they can the gas and oil infrastructure in Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and possibly Oman. I didn't even know Oman had a huge amount of oil and gas infrastructure here. Sorry, I'm reading some of the updates from both Reuters and the Associated Press on who they're trying to hit with their last remaining missiles and drones. They've also been attempting to throw a series of arms and drones at the Al-Aqsa, or the Dome of the Rock Mosque in Jerusalem. You say, wait, why would Iranians try to blow up the Dome of the Rock in the old city of Jerusalem? So two things. If you've never been to that side of the world, really quickly here, the entire old city of Jerusalem could fit in what is very likely your local high school like campus. Most university campuses are larger than the old city of Jerusalem. It's a very, very, very small place. And most of the people living inside the old city of Jerusalem are Muslim. And a lot of different factions of them. Now you have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, what Catholics would call the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, what Protestants most often refer to as the Church of the Resurrection, inside the old city in the Christian quarter. And in that particular area, it was shut down recently for the first time in quite a while because Iran's been attempting to launch drones and ballistic missiles at the mosque standing on the site of where the temple, the Jewish temple used to be. You say, wait, why would Iran be trying to do this? Iran is trying every last thing they can do to try to get the the broader Muslim community really angry at the United States and Israel. So the first thing they did they thought would work is that they would bomb American bases, but also hit some civilian infrastructure nearby. And then that would really outrage Qatar at the United States with the base in Doha. And it would really outrage the UAE, and it would outrage Jordan and Saudi Arabia and all of these other little various countries that the United States has a place in. And it didn't. Instead, it really upset the Muslims in those countries at Iran, who are just tired of Iran's crap at this point. And so now Iran is throwing all kinds of things at what? What are they throwing all of the missiles and the drones that they have left at? The very few? They're trying to blow up the Dome of the Rock Mosque in Jerusalem so that Muslims will believe I'm not joking here. The Tucker Carlson line, which the Iranian regime is attempting to broadcast Tucker Carlson's shows to the Iranian people. So that Tucker, who is claiming that it's actually the Mossad and the Jews who are running around bombing everything. Like, I know you're seeing literally missiles fly out of Iran and into Qatar. I know you're seeing missiles fly out of Iran and to the Dome of the Rock. But, really, it's the Jews are trying to false flag their way to stuff. You don't have to chew on your own elbows and just go full retard here. And by the way, the people of Iran aren't buying it. They had a little impromptu rally in which we got one Getty photograph out, and there were 3 whole people in the little pro-Iranian regime rally in Tehran. One was an old fat man holding up a sign upside down. So that's what the regime is currently at. Now, this brings us to Kharg Island, because Kharg Island, where Iran is also suspected to be preparing some strikes against, this is the final strategic martyrdom that we talked about yesterday, is that Kharg Island, which again handles 90% of the oil exports from Iran, because they do all of the processing there, all of it, all of the oil. By the way, this is why Israel bombed the gas fields in Iran. It means that really Kharg Island is pretty much all that's left. China buys all of its energy that it buys from Iran from that particular island, and then through the Strait of Hormuz out to China. And then China resells that after doing some of its advanced processing to places like Vietnam, who's also having an energy crisis, and they're starting to see riots against the administration in Vietnam. And never in a million years did I think Trump would come back 51 years later and perhaps win the Vietnam War. Holy crap. But that's another, we'll have to get to that news when we get to it. The Trump administration pointed out today that the people of Iran should take very good care over the weekend, or I should say encourage, not pointed out, that people in Iran should take very good care over the weekend because of statements that then Iranians went out and proved. So originally the State Department said, hey, Iran is going to target a bunch of people in celebrating festivities like Persian New Year that are in parks and recreational areas and touristy places. The United States, through the State Department, and then Israel's Foreign Ministry Department, said in messages in Farsi and in Arabic several other languages. You should stay out of these areas because Iran is going to target you, their own civilians. They will see you celebrating, perhaps, under the guise of, oh, it's a holiday. We're not celebrating the demise of the regime. We're celebrating a holiday. They will see you and they will shoot you. Now, it was really funny watching a lot of the online crazy nutcase people who, again, think that everything is the Jews hiding behind the cupboard, suggesting this was a false flag. Everything's a false flag unless it actually happens, in which case the United States deserves it. But there was going to be a false flag. The United States and Israel were going to shoot all of the Iranian people that we want to rise up against the government. Hold on. Maybe it sounds better if I do the X-Files music. There we go. The United States was going to mow down people. It was going to be like Kent State times a McBajillion. Jane Fonda already climbing on top of military equipment. It's Vietnam again. That's right. And I hate to be the bearer of bad, but it was the Iranians themselves that came out about an hour later and said, we're going to shoot everyone in the parks and the tourist areas. We're going to shoot everyone in recreational areas. I'm not joking. Here is the audio translation and reporting summary from the BBC, who seems shocked to report this. And you can hear the reporter almost a little bit glum that he has to confirm that, no, it wasn't a false flag. Iran actually is like, yeah, we'll kill you.
Iran's new supreme leader Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei called Friday for the enemies of his nations to have their security taken away in his latest message to the public. Khamenei made the remarks in a statement issued on his behalf to President Masoud Pezeshkian after Israel killed Iran's intelligence minister. It was read on state TV IRIB. The newsreader says security must be denied to internal and external enemies and be granted to the people at large. Khamenei hasn't been seen since he was named as supreme leader after his father Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the first day of the war on February 28. There have been growing comments from American and Israeli officials that Mojtaba Khamenei was hurt in the war. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
So then Al Jazeera gets on and says, well, not only is he saying security is of the utmost importance, no, the Iranian current top military spokesman, General Abul Fazl, what in the Fonzie Muppet nonsense? General Abul Fazl Shirkachi, General Abe Shakira, has warned that, quote, parks, recreational areas, and tourist destinations will not be safe for the enemies of Tehran, internally and externally. So they are simultaneously announcing that they are going to try to bomb like the Eiffel Tower and the Washington Monument and like Myrtle Beach. Now, you don't see me smiling because, again, we've seen these Islamic terror attacks take place at, for example, Bondi Beach outside of Sydney, Australia. But alas, they've also promised, and they've already done so. We already have footage that's coming out of Iran that is too grotesque for us to share on the air with you right now. I believe that 2C TV is currently putting up some of those pieces of footage, but they are already attacking their own people celebrating holidays in Iran. So just well done, Iranian regime, doing the exact same thing that we absolutely knew that you could do. Now, again, what does this mean for the president? What does this actually mean for Carg Island? Because I don't know if you've seen the markets. They are not particularly enjoying the instability in the war. And because so many countries rely on the oil from Iran, including because the United States said, hey, you're not allowed to buy oil from Russia during the Russo-Ukrainian war. Well, you got to get it from somewhere. And I don't know if you know this, but there's not a lot of oil wells in Germany. Now, Norway's super effing rich, but outside of that, what are you going to do? Well, you got to go to Iran. Or you have to get oil from the Straits of Hormuz from some of the other Middle Eastern powers, you know, the OPEC nations. Come on, a lot of you guys obviously and clearly remember where a lot of countries are getting their oil. So the markets didn't like this. Brent, the crude oil price, it's sky high per barrel. And as we talked about yesterday, the president of the United States, unlike when he's been asked about other economic matters, and he said, no, we're just cleaning up after Joe Biden. This, he's been very clear. Yes, it is absolutely the situation in the United States and Iran, Israel, the Middle East, abroad. This particular operation, Epic Fury, is absolutely currently jacking up the prices. But as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's usually pretty stinking accurate when it comes to saying predictions of the movement of the United States, pretty soon oil prices are going to plummet. Now, most of the time you'd say, oh, come on, everyone likes to predict the price of oil. Well, if the United States ends up doing what it did with Venezuela and ended up doing with certain trade aspects with regard to Panama and ended up taking over certain, for example, semiconductor shipping policies like it did with Taiwan, or perhaps brokering certain agreements regarding steel like it did with Japan, the exact same thing the Trump administration does quite consistently. Well, it just so happens that the President of the United States may be about to do the same thing regarding Karg Island, meaning that an expeditionary force of Marines or other groups that we have in the area might just take over that island semi-permanently. Not as a nation-building exercise, not as all right, everyone, here's how we're going to train you to have a democracy, but saying, your oil, a lot of oil, could be oil that we're not going to sell. China, you better dance to my tune. This is the president being asked, as usual, about Karg Island. Again, the reason that I laugh here is that the president of the United States has been asked quite a few times about his plan for Karg Island or whether or not he's going to do this. He's like, I'm not telling you our plans for military and diplomatic maneuvers in advance. He's tired of getting this, but anyway, here you go. So if you couldn't hear, again, outside of airplane or outside of helicopter, reporter questions is the bane of my existence on this show. The reporter goes, what's your plan for Karg Island?
What's your plan for Karg Island? I may have a plan or I may not, but how would I ever say that to a reporter? If I said that to a reporter, Marco would say, please, sir, let's bring you over to the helicopter immediately.
Now, I will say this. Again, some of the same crew who was saying the United States was going to mow down a bunch of people in Iranian parks and stuff. But I will point out that same crew is now, I should say and, not but. In this particular instance, they are now saying that, oh, how could Trump not have a plan? He doesn't even know whether he has a plan or not. You do realize that clearly the president right there is going, I may have a plan, I may not, is what he says every time. Every time. You realize the president doesn't actually sit down with the military generals and go, okay, here's what I want to do. I want Bravo Company. Bravo Company, you're going to take the Eastern Ridge. And then I want to see paratroopers drop down beautiful, amazing America 250 branded parachutes onto the airstrip on northern Karg Island. And then I'm feeling frisky. Have a Marine detachment. Go ahead and do Iwo Jima. Raise the flag. Here, he doesn't do that. Obviously, the Pentagon, the Department of War, has contingencies for each and everything that happens in a war. Now, it has been a long time since I sat and heard pre-plebe lectures, as in summer leadership seminar lectures at West Point Military Academy in West Point, New York. But one of the key things in our ethics class, of all things, that the professor went on and on and on about is that if we had a plan all the way back into World War I and World War II for taking Canada, folks, we have a plan for every single way you could possibly think of to slice up, to dice up any island off the coast of any country on the face of this earth, including, yes, you guessed it, Karg Island. And again, this isn't, dropping huge companies of troops in and sending a surge of troops in through Mahabad in the West. In fact, NATO, also at the point of the United States, has withdrawn troops from Iraq. Oh, you didn't hear about that? Oh, well then, my pleasure to bring you a bit of news that you're perhaps not hearing at the moment. According to both the Associated Press and CBS News, NATO has effectively pulled out several different, I have to be kind of careful in how I point this out of Iraq, several different kinds of troop orders in what is called an advisory mission. So according to the Reuters article itself, this being published out of Brussels, quote, NATO has withdrawn all of its troops from an advisory mission in Iraq. Now, this advisory mission includes training and military operational and logistics staff, the specialty of the United States that we have tried to teach Europe. Of course, the French screwed it all up, but it's the French. So in regard to NATO, the United States does dispatch our logistics corps and the Army Corps of Engineers to several advisory missions around the globe. Some of those are in Iraq. Now, wait a minute. Isn't that boots on the ground? Yes. the United States maintains some boots on the ground in a lot of different places that we are and aren't at war with. Did you know we have boots on the ground in Taiwan? We do. We have a communications attaché. I believe that's public knowledge. If not, I'm going to get in trouble here in a few minutes. We have a communications attaché that operates as a forward operations post for some of the listening alongside the Strait in the South China Sea. This is a common thing with the United States. It's not just because there are, in fact, operations in an area doesn't mean that we're starting a big, huge George W. Bush, Nikki Haley style, Wilsonian, we're going to teach everyone democracy style nonsense. But NATO recognizing, hey, maybe the area with the Kurds in it is going to get a little spicy here in a couple of days. And so, in doing so, quote, this is from U.S. Air Force General Alexis Grankovich, I would like to thank the Republic of Iraq and all of the allies who assisted in the safe relocation of NATO personnel from Iraq. Boy, doesn't that sound like the U.S. is planning for a ground invasion? I remember, don't you, when George H.W. Bush, during the first Gulf War? Remember the first Gulf War? Withdraw your forces immediately or face a coalition of the United States and its allies. And then we built up a coalition, right? On the border, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, into Iraq. And then they launched the invasion. There was a buildup. So a common mail time question that I have received, the reason that you see me perhaps a smidge agitated in this instance, the questions that do often come in asking what reason the Trump administration gave for these particular actions and why the United States was suddenly and without any warning dragged into this conflict by Israel. You might forget the president saying, I'm going to send an aircraft carrier, get it over there, rev up the jets, boys. And then sending in the second aircraft carrier. Do you remember these were news cycles? You scroll back up through some earlier episodes of the Tony Kinnett cast. I will gladly be there, slightly younger and slightly prettier, telling you in an earlier time, before the Operation Epic Fury ever took place, about the numbers of craft and whether we thought the president was going to do something. And I remember saying, hey, J.D. Vance is saying we're going to be super diplomatic. And that was a ruse because that's what he does before every U.S. conflict. And then scoreboard, the stuff came true. Now, the audience that tunes into the show, you guys have an IQ over 35. You're not Rashida Tlaib. You're not the weird lesbian running Code Pink. I mean, hey, you probably have it together. Wait, I think that someone in our comments had a visceral reaction. So much so, a visceral reaction, that they sent in a super chat about it. Saint Apathy, it's a great name. $5 super chat. You guys do not need to send in super chats. Said, you had to have Medea Benjamin of Code Pinko in your video thumbnail. Now I have blurred vision. She and Jody Evans are just awful. I had no idea what the weird lesbian running Code Pink is. The pink vagina hat potentate herself. I don't know what that Chinese asset's name is. All I'll tell you is Fang Fang was prettier. But anyway, along that line, also a very kind $5 super chat from Agnes said, hey, Tony, did you hear anything about J.D. Vance not running for president in 28? Rumors are that Tulsi might resign. Questions on that line. I'll answer those right here instead of doing a big mail time shindig since we're in this particular instance. Do not take any of the wild predictions on whether someone is running in 2028 seriously right now. Don't. Everything right now is an exploratory campaign. Now, some people like Kristi Noem use the Trump administration's money to do their exploratory campaign and film yeehaw horseback riding videos. And then Podium Barbie and her manho Corey Lewandowski got sideways promoted, whoosh, erased from existence. That presidential exploratory went absolutely nowhere. You also saw Cory Booker try this. Gavin Newsom did his little podcast, and currently he's enjoying about 13 different scandals. Other than that, I mean, J.D. Vance, I'd say it's a little too early. Now, again, a lot of people, their public opinion on the administration is shifting. I will remind you that Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, was the candidate that ended up making it through the primary before Joe Biden. And the reason Hillary wasn't picked during the Joe Biden run is because she was considered more toxic than Flint tap water. So the Secretary of State is more often looked to in a presidential election in the modern age for a primary if there is a lot of foreign policy stuff. So yeah, Rubio's getting a lot of momentum, as he should, but I wouldn't say that means like, this means Rubio's going to run and Vance isn't. Don't count your chickens before they file to run for office. So easy there. As for rumors that Tulsi might resign, I haven't heard anything about that. I happen to know there are a lot of people in the same crew that said all of the stuff that's been proven wrong, that they really want her to resign because she's now come out and agreed with the head of the CIA, because again, she's the director of national intelligence, and has agreed that no, the Israeli conspiracy theasing nonsense, conspiracy anesthetizing is not worth anyone's time. So a lot of people want her to resign. I don't know if she's gonna or not. I need to see some evidence though. There are a lot of outlets everywhere running around saying unnamed source tells me. What that suggests to me, as someone who's seen a lot of the reporting from the New York Times and from the Washington Post, from Reuters. After all, Reuters a couple of weeks ago, they were suggesting that the 82nd Airborne had a major training exercise that was canceled because the White House was sending the whole 82nd Airborne to invade Iran, like from the West. Yeah, that didn't happen, did it? So a lot of leak sealing has resulted in some very spurious reporting that resulted in ousting individuals like Joe Kent, who was cut off from a bunch of meetings so that he could then try to leak what he could and fell for a really, really, really old leaking trick, at least via some of the reporting that I'm seeing, and may or may not have leaked things through proxy. Now, according to Joe Kent, he says, I never leaked anything. I never talked to media. That has been his response. I've seen the reports that I have leaked to media. I, Joe Kent, have never contacted these groups. Well, dude, your wife is a left-wing activist, my man. I will once again remind the fun crew out there that Joe Kent, who still does to this day, I guess I should probably check this, follows me on social media, on X, a small number of people that he follows. I reached out and said, hey, have you or a proxy leaked? In other words, did you give something to be leaked to anybody? He didn't answer that question. So the Trump administration is doing some rather effective things. Far be it from me to be the guy to say, hey, let the man cook before, everyone gets their panties in quite the bunch. But this is, in fact, one of those instances. Now, according to CBS News, quote, Pentagon officials have made detailed preparations for deploying U.S. ground forces, quote, into Iran, with senior military commanders having submitted specific requests aimed at preparing for such an option if such a decision is made by President Trump. Multiple sources briefed on the discussions told CBS News. Now, what are these particular preparations? Well, these preparations include, the Royal Air Force finally, Keir Starmer said, yeah, you can use Diego Garcia, that little tiny island in the middle of effing nowhere. You're allowed to use that now. So the military commanders, the admirals, and I suppose the generals, if some poor logistics guy gets stuck at handling Diego Garcia, the poor sad brass, they're going to have to take that into account. And again, part of being brass is coming up with a series of plans for anything at any time. The President of the United States has not decided in his entirety what he is going to do. But some of these things are, hey, if we were to capture some prisoners of war, some dudes on Karg Island, if the United States were to have some special operations team that did go and pick up a couple of pieces, or I call it the nuclear dust, the uranium, that kind of a thing. What if you encounter a prisoner of war? Where are they sent? Do we send them to CCOT in El Salvador? We send them to Guantanamo Bay? Do we deliver them in lingerie to Mojtaba Khomeini? What are we doing here? I mean, I'm going to level with you. That makes quite a lot of sense to me. Now, this brings us to the last point here for the news that I'm going to dive in with you. The Pentagon has set a bill to go over to Congress. And this bill says, hey, look, we have used some of our ammunition in this war. We have. And because we've used some of the ammunition, we'd like to refill it. That's it. We would like to refill the stockpiles of the ammunition that we have spent and other material that we expect to spend over the next couple of weeks. And there have been all of the pearl clutchings in the world. Again, and I'm not going to be too harsh on people because some of this is expected. For example, when I'm not sure if I ended up pulling the clip before we got into this evening. It doesn't look like I did. No, maybe. Here's Lauren Boebert, Colorado. She really, really doesn't want the Pentagon to get $200 billion a year. Very, very, very adamant about it. Here you go.
I will not vote for a war supplemental. No, I am a no. I've already told leadership I am a no on any war supplementals. I am so tired of spending money elsewhere. I am tired of the industrial war complex getting all of our hard-earned tax dollars.
Okay, so first of all, I do very much sympathize with not wanting to just endlessly vote through big spending packages. I agree. Really, I do. I understand the criticisms that a lot of Americans have. I am one of the people, again, who just interviewed Dr. Carrie Ingram, who just had an excellent Wall Street Journal article all about the Trump administration shrinking spending permanently by getting rid of a lot of staff with recurring expenses, getting rid of a lot of these major grant programs. However, it really should be noted that in fiscal year 2024, the entire U.S. military budget was 13% of total federal spending. The 2024 DoD budget request was 3.4% of the GDP. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe just endless blank checks are the way to go. But pretending that the industrial, super military state complex is getting all of the money in the budget of the United States, no. And by the way, you don't even need me to tell you that. It's Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee. It's Representative Brandon Gill of Texas. It's Senator Josh Hawley, the populist. It's Senator Ted Cruz, the traditional conservative. And it's on the more establishment side of the Senate, Susan Collins. Very, very, very different parts. Joe Kennedy of Louisiana have made it very clear. We are not spending all of our money on the military. It's disingenuous to suggest. I really don't care for the only caring about the huge. Thomas Massey's like, the debt's reached this particular level. Oh, it's now at 39 trillion. Everything is over. And again, I don't like the debt is swelling, but the majority of the United States budget, even in supplemental packages, is nowhere close to being the majority for the military or special actions around the world. And I would rather replenish our stockpile. Weren't we just hearing from these same people? Do you remember going into the Iranian operation? What were you told? You were told the U.S. is running out of missiles, that we were going to run out and Iran was just going to have free will to just bomb us all. Do you remember? We were running out of interceptors. Oh, you don't remember those particular tweets and posts and news statements? CNN having analysts on that were making this claim we were going to run out of THAAD missile launch ammunition. Oh, we were going to run out of SAM packages. We were going to run out of bullets and missiles and gun. And then China was going to take Taiwan while we were sleeping. Now, currently, China has a fuel crisis that is so intense. There are more than a few analysts, not just in the United States, but across the Western Europe kind of economic indices, who are now suggesting China doesn't even have enough fuel to invade Taiwan. Guys, the Taiwan Strait is not exactly a wide body of water. J.B. Pritzker is wider than the Taiwan Strait. But the idea was that China was going to take Taiwan because we wouldn't have enough missiles to Rudy toot and shoot, and they were going to drain us all and it was all going to be gone. No, that's not the case. But it is good to actually keep a larger stockpile. Again, if let's steelman their argument, let's say the U.S. doesn't have enough missiles. Don't you think we should have enough missiles then? And I'm sorry, aren't these missiles and things manufactured here? So I understand that the hate towards the military industrial complex to a degree, but are those not Americans working in those factories putting those together? I'm sorry, I would much rather put federal money towards Americans building American weapons than I would seeing American tax dollars sent to China or grant programs in Taiwan or grant programs for steel in Japan so that other countries can make things and then sell it to us. I think it's rather more America first. And by the way, I will be very open and honest with you. Indiana has quite the large defense industry. You know what? My state's manufacturing was hollowed out by Obama's beautiful 2008 programs of glory and George W. Bush, everything's going to be fine, so just ignore it strategy. And I got the divine privilege of watching my father, working for the Dana Corporation, lose his job and that business move to Mexico. I'm sorry, the idea that that Indiana Hoosier Manufacturing might produce something to restock the American arsenal so that other kids don't have to see the same kind of thing that I saw, yeah, I'm going to level with you. I really don't care. I would rather there be more. In fact, as I've asked Senator Jim Banks, maybe we start making the A-10 again. I want an upgraded version of the A-10 Warthog, the greatest close air support plane of all time, not even close. I want to see 2 of those factories and then a 3rd factory for spare parts in Indiana tomorrow. That's what I want. Screw the data center construction. I want to see a factory producing A-10s or whatever upgraded version, because, some aspects of them are a smidge dated. Give them some targeting radar. I'm tired of pretending that America being a dominant power is not awesome. Secretary of War Hegseth, I know, big shocker, agrees.
And what happened with that as well. As far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future, ensure that our ammunition everything's refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond. I mean, President Trump, as he said, rebuilt the military in his first term, didn't think he'd use it as dynamically in his second, but he had. So thank goodness he did that. And an investment like this is meant to say, hey, we'll replace anything that was spent. And now that we're reviving our defense industrial base and rebuilding the arsenal of freedom and cutting deals like our great deputy secretaries here is doing, long lead times on exquisite munitions, we're going to be refilled faster than anyone imagined. And I think, we're also still dealing with the environment that Joe Biden created, which was depleting those stockholds and not sending them to our own military, but to Ukraine, which is every time we reach back and look at.
Now, fair. The United States gave a bunch of old munitions to Ukraine, and then we have thrown in a fair amount of munitions that we currently have. Again, those kinds of munitions that allow us not to go through hundreds of American lives. Again, so far, the majority of casualties in this particular war, which are absolutely, wholeheartedly, very much so, a tragedy, and these individuals should be remembered and honored. And after this operation is over, I really do believe that it's high time that we had another Washington, D.C. monument for those of each and every one of those who did perish in this conflict, so that they can be honored and remembered forever. I will gladly donate to that project. And I'm sure that many of you would, and if it becomes an opportunity, will as well. But it is important to note that when you compare it to the level of destruction that we have wreaked upon the Iranian infrastructure, the regime, the newest leader of the Basij, who's just every day there's a new one because he keeps getting oofed. Because of those munitions that we've produced, we have had far more friendly fire or operational equipment failures that have resulted in American casualties than we have through Iranian strikes on Americans causing fatalities. And that's not a small thing. And that is something that, again, is not actually being heaped in these particular amounts of praise. And again, for the argument, this is all just a big, huge financial enrichment of Israel. Well, according to the Associated Press, the United States approved, this is according to Matthew Leovritos of the Associated Press today, the U.S. just approved a $23 billion arms sale to Arab allies as the Iran war escalates. Quote, in notices sent to Congress on Thursday, the State Department said the U.S. would sell to the United Arab Emirates more than $8 billion in air defense systems and related materiel, including drones, air-to-air missiles, and munitions for the F-16 fighter jet. To Kuwait, $8 billion in missile defense and radar systems. To Jordan, $70.5 million. Jordan's a lot poorer, and there are some reasons why, and it's their own ding-dang-dong fault. $70.5 million in aircraft and munitions support, and then another $6 billion in sales to the 3 countries approved, but not requiring congressional notification because they involved adjustments to previously approved packages or purely commercial sales. That's according to a State Department official. These are not given. We didn't just give these to the countries. They bought them from us. And may I say, based on some of the systems that were sent over, at a rather inflated rate. So yeah, the United States federal government has made money on some of those arms sales to the Middle East. I mean, are we not allowed to point that out too? Is that not a win? I was told that we were just giving things to people. No, and by the way, the Israeli government has also purchased a massive number of munitions from the United States as well. $50 to $60 billion worth of munitions in just the last couple of years. So, you know, I'm of the opinion right now, personally here, that I'm going to wait before I get out the pearls and I start saying, I'm not going to vote for it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to know. NATO's withdrawing troops from portions of the Middle East. President Trump's likely to take Kharg Island. Apparently, I guess, according to the New York Times, Colombia, their president might be under the same kind of investigation from Maduro. The lesbians are sailing to Cuba. All right. Interesting stuff indeed. Now, that said, I would hope you guys would have a wonderful weekend, but I cannot end the show without saying a little something about Chuck Norris. So Chuck Norris did pass away today. He had been hospitalized in an emergency situation in Hawaii. And Chuck Norris is formative in American culture for a number of reasons, for a lot of different age ranges and groups, in a number of roles. So obviously his combat, the phenomenally acted movies that he did with Bruce Lee, the action star theatrics that would later on bleed into countless cameos. Of course, his work in Walker, Texas Ranger is a show. Sorry, I was trying to differentiate between his role with in Dragon with Bruce Lee, and then also his work long term with Walker, Texas Ranger. Chuck Norris getting a bit up there, though. Many of us remembered him for example, his role in little cameos in, for example, in Dodgeball, a true underdog story. Chuck was a phenomenal guy. He was also passionate about his faith in Christ. You know, not many 85, 86-year-olds could have produced such a huge cultural touchstone that I would say easily beats, on the folk side tale of things, easily beats Paul Bunyan or Johnny Appleseed. The number of Chuck Norris jokes that you've heard, that I've heard, are incredible. In fact, I'd made some of them with the Ministry of Truth. After learning he was hospitalized, I said, this may be the only guy who, before or after needing to be hospitalized, built the hospital first. Or that he had, after being hospitalized, provided medical care to all 36 doctors and 78 nurses on staff. Chuck Norris was also a passionate Christian. He talked quite often about his faith in Christ, and I'm excited to see one of the most legendary dudes that I spent a lot of my childhood looking up to at the Eastern Gate. So to the guy that woke up from his death this morning, corrected a typo on his death certificate, shook the hand of the doctor, and then told Christ, yes, he was finally coming. Then, you know, finally died the second time. To Chuck Norris, rest in peace, and I'll see you again soon, brother. All right, now I can say we are done for the week. Have a wonderful weekend. If for some reason troops make landfall on Kharg Island and the United States has yet another place of oil, and we see Brent falling towards 60, I'll let you know. We'll go live. There's a link in the description, by the way, for that in the YouTube chat, or I should say in the YouTube description. There's a link to the Discord. You can join us there, hang out with us. We have other stuff that we post there occasionally. And then again, of course, don't forget code TONY20, TONY20 for pre-sleep. That is only good for this weekend. You wait till Monday, it's gone. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.